It started like any other normal day, the kind of day that doesn't stand out in memory until something goes wrong. A young woman left her home that morning, moving through her routine with no sign of distress, no urgency, nothing unusual that anyone could point to later. She had plans, small responsibilities, the kind of ordinary schedule that blends into every other day. If someone had passed her on the street, they would have seen nothing more than another person going about her life. And that's exactly what makes this story so unsettling, because that ordinary day became the last confirmed moment anyone would ever see her. When she didn't return home, it didn't immediately raise alarm. At first, there were simple explanations. Maybe she got delayed, maybe her phone battery died, maybe she decided to stay somewhere unexpectedly. These things happen, and people don't immediately assume the worst. But as hours stretched into the night, and the night turned into the next morning, those explanations began to feel less convincing. Her phone remained unreachable, messages went unanswered, and the silence where there should have been communication started to feel heavy. By the second day, concern shifted into fear. The people closest to her knew this wasn't normal. She wasn't someone who disappeared without explanation. She didn't ignore calls. She didn't leave people wondering. That's when her family contacted authorities, and what had been a quiet worry became an official search. Investigators began with the basics, retracing her last known steps, building a timeline, identifying where she had been and who she had interacted with. They looked at surveillance footage where available, checked transportation routes, and tried to find any detail that stood out. But almost immediately, they encountered a problem that would define the entire case. There was nothing, no sign of struggle, no witness reporting anything suspicious, no clear indication that something had gone wrong. It was as if she had simply disappeared between one moment and the next. As the investigation continued, search efforts expanded. Volunteers joined, areas connected to her daily routine were combed through carefully, and her personal life was examined in detail. Friends were questioned, co-workers were interviewed, and her recent activities were analyzed for anything out of place. Still, nothing concrete emerged. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The longer the case went without answers, the more it began to feel like something deeper was at play. Missing person cases often rely on small breakthroughs, a sighting, a clue, something that shifts the direction of the investigation. But in this case, there was only silence. That silence was eventually broken, but not in the way anyone had hoped. Somewhere far from where she was last seen, a discovery was made. It was small, something that could have easily been overlooked, something that didn't immediately appear connected to anything significant. But once it was examined more closely, the reality became impossible to ignore. It was a human finger, severed and alone. When forensic analysis confirmed that it belonged to the missing woman, the entire case changed instantly. What had once been treated as a disappearance was now something far more serious, something that suggested violence, intention, and a level of mystery that made the situation even more disturbing. Investigators were forced to reconsider everything: the timeline, the locations, the people involved. All of it had to be reviewed again, this time with a different perspective. The question was no longer simply where she had gone, but what had been done to her. The discovery raised more questions than it answered. Why was only a single piece found? Where was the rest of her? And how had this evidence ended up in that specific location? These weren't simple questions, and the lack of immediate answers only deepened the mystery. The investigation shifted focus, exploring new possibilities. One theory suggested that she may have encountered someone unexpectedly, someone dangerous who acted in a moment of opportunity. Another theory proposed something more calculated, that whoever was responsible had planned everything carefully, ensuring there would be little to no evidence left behind. But the presence of the finger complicated both ideas. It suggested either a mistake or a message, something that wasn't meant to be found but was, or something that was intentionally left behind. As investigators continued their work, they began to examine patterns, similar cases, anything that might provide context or direction. They looked into individuals with histories of violent behavior, people who had crossed paths with her in recent days, and even those who had only briefly interacted with her. Yet despite these efforts, no single lead proved strong enough to move the case forward in a meaningful way. Time continued to pass, and with it came a shift in how the case was perceived. Public interest grew, fueled by the unusual nature of the evidence and the lack of answers. People began to speculate, forming their own theories, trying to make sense of something that didn't follow a clear pattern. Some believed it was the result of a calculated act, carried out by someone who knew exactly how to avoid detection. Others believed it may have been random, a chance encounter that turned into something far more serious. But regardless of the theory, one fact remained unchanged. There was no clear answer. The investigation continued, but like many cases that reached this stage, it began to slow. New leads became less frequent, and the likelihood of a sudden breakthrough grew smaller. Still, the case was never closed. It remained active, a reminder that something had happened that had yet to be fully understood. Over time, the story became less about a single disappearance and more about the mystery surrounding it. The absence of answers created a space where uncertainty lived, and that uncertainty is often what makes cases like this so unsettling. Because without a clear explanation, the mind is left to fill in the gaps, and those imagined possibilities are often more disturbing than the truth itself. To this day, the case remains unresolved. There is no confirmed suspect, no full understanding of what happened, and no closure for those who continue to search for answers. Only that single piece of evidence remains, a silent and unsettling reminder that something occurred, something deliberate, something that has yet to be explained. And in the absence of answers, one question continues to linger. How does someone vanish so completely, leaving behind almost nothing except one small, chilling clue?